Very busy week in Missouri politics and nationwide, and we're right here to get right into it with State Senator Kurt Schaefer. Senator Schaefer, welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics.
Thanks for having me back.
Big week. The first news of the week didn't exactly come from the legislature. It came from the courts. Amendment 5, something you were behind, strengthened, essentially, if I'm not wrong, took the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that protects gun rights and put it in the Missouri Constitution. All the liberals, all the editorial pages, all the professors said, oh, you've made this terrible, drastic thing that's going to destroy, everyone's going to have a gun now. The court said no, nothing there, right? Nothing
right, and that's what I was saying all along. And so Article 1, Section 23 of the Missouri Constitution is your right to keep and bear arms in the Missouri Constitution, like the Second Amendment. And as you said, what we really did with Amendment 5, which I passed 2 years ago through the General Assembly, through a Senate concurrent resolution, got it on the ballot, passed by about 62%, and added that language to the Missouri Constitution. What it did was it added language that basically brought Missouri's Constitution in line with the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, after two very important holdings from the U.S. Supreme Court in the last 10 years, Heller and McDonald. And so what it said basically was that, if the state of Missouri is going to have a provision that interferes with your right and it defines that right as inalienable, it's a very important, specifically enshrined right to keep and bear arms, that anything that impedes on that is going to have to be viewed by the court with strict scrutiny, which is the highest level of constitutional review you get. We also added the provision that said it can be some lower standard of review if you're dealing with someone with a mental illness or you're regulating violent felons. And so what the court said is, yes, it's not only violent felons that the state can regulate, which is true and what the language clearly says. And some people thought it was otherwise, but the language clearly says that the legislature has the ability to regulate that. It's just going to be viewed with strict scrutiny, and that's what the court said.
Moving along, the Sanctity of Life Committee. We're in the headlines almost on a weekly basis over the interim investigating the University of Missouri and Planned Parenthood and those ties. That committee, we haven't seen much from it. Will that be reinstated, and what's the status of the work you've been doing?
Kind of two issues there. The first issue on the Sanctity of Life Committee, it was an interim committee, which means that we can only meet when the session is not going. So the session, when it started the first week of January, that committee dissolved. Obviously, we have a lot of work left to do, so I'm talking with the pro tem Ron Richard about how we're going to reconstitute that for a new committee that would go on while we're in session. But the other issue is, in December, what we did in the committee, we issued a subpoena to Planned Parenthood to produce documents to show actually how they are disposing of body parts after they perform an abortion. And what we got from that was, go pound sand. We're not going to comply with your subpoena.
Can you do that?
Well, no, you can't. And so I sent a letter last week to Planned Parenthood saying we are going to enforce that subpoena. Now, the subpoena power of the legislature has only been used 3 times, really, in recent history. In 1991, when Jay Nixon was a senator and used it. 3 years ago, when I used it to find out that that the state of Missouri was giving the entire concealed carry list to the federal government, and then obviously just this last December when I did it with Planned Parenthood. But the interesting thing is, even though that subpoena power hasn't been used much, we can't ever find an instance where the Senate or the legislature, or the House either, has ever had to actually initiate a formal proceeding, a contempt proceeding, to somebody who's not in compliance with a validly issued subpoena.
Give me the time frame on this.
You know, it's a formal process, probably a month, maybe in the next month. But it's interesting because the same thing is going on with Senator Claire McCaskill now in the U.S. Senate, where she sits on a committee that issued subpoenas to private drug companies. Those drug companies also were in contempt. They don't want to answer. And so she was in the media just this week saying they're going to initiate contempt proceedings, which I don't think they've done. About 20 years ago, I think, is the last time they've done it. But we've never done it in the Missouri Senate. But we're going to do it now, and we're going to get that information.
So the next development on this comes before spring break?
Yes, absolutely.
Interesting. Speaking of the University of Missouri, people forget sometimes that in states where Republicans took the majorities, like Wisconsin, there have been huge budget cuts to the universities. That hasn't happened in Missouri. Some attribute it to you being chairman of the Appropriations Committee. You've given some tough love the last year or two, and we went through all their problems here on the show in the Missouri Times. What I want to know is, what are a couple things they could do to begin to turn things around?
Well, first of all, and I see the editorials that say the General Assembly doesn't like higher education. Education, funding from the General Assembly to higher education has increased every single year since I've been in the General Assembly, since I came in 2009. Now, the governor hasn't let him have it every year. The money's there. It's real money. He just won't give it to him. But we, on the legislative end, have increased it every single year. And no one's been a bigger supporter of the University of Missouri than I have.
It's in your district.
It's in my district, and I'm an alum, and it's very important to the state of Missouri, not just my district alone. And I've done a lot for the university, but as I like to tell people, there's a difference between being a supporter and being an enabler. And so when you see some of the things that we've seen, which is really a lack of leadership, there's a real question of why is a public institution getting about $500 million a year for its operating budget, so $500 million a year, when there really doesn't seem to be any transparency or any accountability. And so I think what we're really going to look at this session is there sufficient transparency and accountability to make sure that the taxpayer money that is going to the University of Missouri is actually being spent for what taxpayers want it to be spent on, or is it simply going into some vacuum for a lot of things that are coming to light now?
Is the university, I mean, they're not fighting the audit, are they?
No, and I think, you know, one thing about the audit is they do audits frequently on a smaller basis, and the auditor right now says that she's doing an audit, and it is an audit that, you know, look, it needs to be done, but it's somewhat limited. I think Senator Schmidt has a bill that hopefully we can get passed that is a much broader perspective audit, which I would really like to see at the university.
Speaking of the University of Missouri, you're running for Attorney General, and your Republican primary opponents, University of Missouri professor. On the Democrat side, the St. Louis County tax assessor Jake Zimmerman, and former Cass County prosecutor Teresa Inslee. How's the campaign going, and where do you see yourself right now in it?
You know, it's going great. The Lincoln Day circuit, which for anybody in a Republican race, those are the Republican dinners that each county has. That started about 2 weeks ago, so it's very busy. The season has just kicked off, so been to a lot of events, speaking a lot, getting great feedback. The grassroots support that I have is just amazing.
When you're at Lincoln Day, do they ask about how you shut down an abortion clinic? I assume on Lincoln Day circuit, that's something that's talked about.
Yeah, they do. In fact, you know, my opponent actually had put out something about, you know, the legislature hasn't done enough. Well, in the last 10 years, there used to be multiple abortion clinics in the state of Missouri. We are now down to one. After we closed the one in Columbia from performing abortions, because they're no longer doing those abortions after the ties were severed with the University of Missouri, where he's a professor, we're down to one abortion clinic. And while that may be one too many, that's a tremendous stride. We have a 72-hour wait period, the most strict in the country. We have the ambulatory surgery center license, which was at issue, and how those privileges got pulled, and they stopped doing abortions at Columbia. I mean, it's amazing where we've come in the last 10 years to support life in the state of Missouri.
So lastly, while you're here, you are still chairman of the Budget Committee. The German Heritage Corridor is passed. Can you tell our German-American viewers that it will be funded?
Well, sitting here is Kurt Ulrich Schaefer. You know, it's an important issue to me, as it is to many Missourians, and it's a critical part of our history in the state of Missouri.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and I tell you, if you go back and you look at some of the issues that arose during the Civil War and the role that German Missourians played in that struggle and really in determining the outcome in the state of Missouri is absolutely amazing. But I think it's very important. I think we need to put resources towards it. It's just like every other budget item. We're going to move forward, and we're going to see how much money we've got and make sure that that we do it appropriately.
Well, I think sometime we have to come back and talk about German-American newspaper publisher and former Republican state legislator Joseph Pulitzer. But we'll leave that for another time. So
I thought you were talking about you.
No, not at all. We'll leave it there, and we'd love to have you back as the campaign unfolds and the legislative session ends on This Week in Missouri Politics.
Love to come back. Thank you very much.
And we'll leave it there, but we'll be right back with our opinion maker panel, but we'll leave you with this week's leading Missouri economic indicators.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople, while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. We're joined by a great opinion maker panel, a couple debuts, starting with Byron DeLear. Big endorsement this week, running for the Bill Otto seat in the House, and now you have his support, right?
Yes, Bill Otto endorsed me, and Scott, I have to say I'm really happy to be here. This show does a great service for the state of Missouri.
I'm glad to have you. Tracy McCreary, welcome back. Old hat at it now. You don't even say the applause. Right. You're just like fine. We're ready to get Rob Johnson back with National Popular Vote, former state senator in Oklahoma, right?
That is correct.
All of our Joplin friends will know exactly what those politics are like. And then debuting for the first time, Sean Rhodes, the proud West Plains Zizzer, representative from Howell County. Good to have you on.
Well, I appreciate it. You know, it's a great show. Love watching it, and great to be a part of it.
I'm glad you're on. Representative McCreary, there's an issue that's been moving through Missouri politics for a couple years called National Popular Vote. It gets rid of the Electoral College. It just breaks it down and makes it easier for people. You win the most votes, you win the election, just like yours. Yeah. Give me where that is and the cliff notes on why that should pass.
Well, it's one of the most nonpartisan issues I've ever seen come through the Missouri legislature. It's exciting to find things that we can all agree on. It's actually moving forward because there is strong bipartisan support and more and more conversation about it. The thing I like about it is it's a simple concept that would allow Missouri to become more relevant again. Right now, only about 10 states decide the national election. And I think there are a lot of disenfranchised disenchanted Missouri voters out there that would feel like they were part of the process if their vote actually counted.
Well, you look at your House district, right? When you have a competitive race, more people turn out.
Right.
If you don't have a competitive race and you're not advertising those people, they don't turn out. So there's Missouri now, it was a state we got some attention. Now we're ignored.
Right.
And I think now we know how the rest of the country has felt all this time. And Rob, let me ask you a question. You're the guru, you're the expert on this. If you're a Missourian, you might say, well, Bush versus Gore, my guy won, my guy lost. But on a matter of fairness, but just on a practical matter, we won't see candidates here in the general election. What is the national popular vote? How does it actually become law? Because it might seem a little bit theoretical to people.
Well, I mean, you're exactly right. The presidential candidate will not step foot in Missouri, just like they've never stepped foot in Oklahoma in forever post-convention, because Missouri's already decided, along with 4 out of 5 states in this country. Yeah, I mean, they're either decidedly Republican or decidedly Democrat, and there's no need to go campaign there. So the campaigns always focus on just the swing states, which vary from time to time, but it's about 10 states, and really 3 or 4 of them are get the majority of the attention. And what the National Popular Vote movement is an interstate compact among states that the legislature adopts and says, when the compact goes into effect, which takes states totaling 270 electoral votes, then it will go into effect, and all of them pledge that they will send their electoral votes to whoever wins the popular vote. We have 165 electoral votes so far in the compact. They're just holding still, waiting for us to add the rest of them to get up to 270.
So, Representative, there are people in West Plains now that we all kind of know. We think we know what a governor, a sheriff, a mayor, a president does. We don't see that attention in southeast Missouri, southern Missouri, because people know how we're going to vote. But don't you think more people would come out if their vote actually impacted it?
And I think that was one of the key issues that was brought up in talking with Rob, and was you're going to make the candidates try to be out more and to utilize markets just not in Iowa or in Florida. They're going to utilize the Missouri market. They're going to utilize every market they can because every vote counts. One of the things that was brought up to me was from a senator from California was, I've got an hour commute home. I know that that California is going to be a Democrat state. Do I vote? Do I not vote? Do I go home with my wife and kids, or do I vote? Because my vote's not going to count, because all this is going to be all those 55 electoral votes are going to the Democrats. So I think it helps do just what everybody in the world that gets elected in the United States, but one office.
Sure. And maybe it's a unifying, in a country that's more and more divided, maybe it's a way to try to bind people together.
I think it makes voter turnout a lot better.
Byron, there is another side of this, though. We were talking in the green room earlier, and you had a very good point that sort of is the converse of it.
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely understand the merits of the proposal to make Missouri more relevant politically and have more attention in regard to the presidential races. But you know, it remains to be seen that you know, when you have a vote, say in Missouri, like say for example, Donald Trump gets 55% of the vote in Missouri, and Hillary Clinton would get 45%. With the National Vote Initiative, essentially all the electoral votes would then go to Hillary Clinton if she won the popular vote in the nation. And this sort of runs afoul of the original founders' design for each state to be an independent democratic silo, if you will, that lends its voice then to the larger national elections. So there is sort of two sides to this coin, and in the spirit of republicanism, in the spirit of federalism, where each state is its own democratic experiment, this kind of starts to dilute that and diffuse that into a different design electorally.
Rob Johnson, you're the expert on this. I'm sure you've heard that argument before.
I have, and you know that's something that comes up. But my answer would be, you know, the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 1 states that the state legislatures shall determine how to award their electors. And there's a common misconception that most people, because they grew up that way, that in a winner-take-all state, that's just the way it was intended by our founding fathers. The system we have today was never discussed at the Constitutional Convention. They could not decide on how to elect the president, and went through numerous different votes on how to get there. And what we have today with 48 states doing a winner-take-all system was never discussed. What they said is, we're going to leave it up to the states. You determine how you want to award your electoral votes. That is your power. And in the first presidential election, only 3 states used the winner-take-all system. Now, we've slowly all transgressed to that and gotten to the point where we've made 4/5 of the country irrelevant, but I think it does retain the state. I'm a big states' rights guy, and the legislature controls what they want to do, and what they're saying is, we choose that we want to be relevant and be part of an actual election. You're still going to have an election in Missouri, just like you always would, but your electoral votes are going to be awarded in a different
Quick
manner.
prediction, Sean Rose, does this pass?
I think it passes the House.
Representatives pass?
It'll pass the House. The Senate is always a wild card.
Byron, we talked about how we elect the president. Let's talk about who we're going to elect. What a week. Bernie Sanders clobbers Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump clobbers everyone. I assume you may be a Hillary supporter. Are you nervous?
I am a Hillary supporter.
Is she just not socialist enough?
Well, that's very funny. You know, Hillary is the most credentialed, qualified candidate to ever run for this office. And in fact, she's, yeah, definitely. I mean, state, Secretary of State, First Lady, U.S. Senator. I mean, her experience is just unparalleled. And, you know, she's going to be a great leader for our nation. I fully support Hillary Clinton for president. And she's going to be the first woman president, which is not an insignificant achievement for our nation in regard to advancing the character of our country.
Tracy, though, Thomas Jefferson had a few qualifications. I mean, she's won. I think that's a wonderful resume, but the practical matter is she's won one election in a very democratic state. Can she come across likable enough to voters to win an election?
Well, I find her likable and credentialed as well. The thing to keep in mind is Iowa and New Hampshire are not exactly the most diverse states we have in our country. I think Hillary Clinton is going to hit it out of the park when she's actually in states like South Carolina and beyond, where there's more diversity of the voter.
Sean Rose, do you have a favorite in the presidential race?
Whoever gets the Republican nod is my favorite.
Oh, what a week, Rob! What do you
That's
think?
weak, I know.
You have connections all across the country. You're a seasoned professional in Oklahoma. Give us who needs to do what to win the nomination on the Republican side.
Well, it's a wait and see approach, because Donald Trump is such a unique factor. We've never seen anything like him, and I think he's got the momentum now. For a while there, I thought Rubio was going to kind of sneak up, and obviously that didn't work as well. So I think the Rubio is still a viable candidate. Obviously, Ted Cruz is doing very well with the far right. I think that somebody's going to have to establish themselves as the one person that is not Donald Trump. And once that happens, you will start seeing a lot of people.
How long do you think that takes?
I thought we would have seen more people drop out by now, but I think within the next couple of weeks, after you get through South Carolina, we'll see. Jeb Bush has got a lot riding on South Carolina. If he doesn't do very well there, I don't know how long he continues. And then we'll see from there.
Sean, isn't it interesting? He sort of started running away from his last name, like the corny yard sign thing. But now he's like, well, maybe I should have went back to that. Maybe George Bush isn't a liability to me. And now he has his brother, his mother in New Hampshire, his brother in South Carolina. who do you think, not who you support, but who do you think ends up being the not Trump guy?
I think Rubio is probably the not Trump guy. When you look at where Cruz sits and where Rubio sits and where Trump falls kind of as far as left to right, I think you're Rubio.
Who do you want to see come out of that? Do you want to see Trump?
Well, I think we could slaughter Trump in the November elections, and not just at the presidential level. I think if Trump is the nominee, that you will see Democratic governor races, Democratic governors win across the country. And I also think that that helps Jason Kander with his victory for the U.S. Senate.
Don't you think the same could be said if you have an actual guy that's not a Republican saying you're a socialist? It's, yeah, I'm a socialist. I thought Russia was a heck of an idea, and we should do that here. I mean, can that guy cost you seats, though?
He possibly could. The thing that would be the most interesting, and I'd love to come back on and talk about it, is if the nominees are Trump and Bernie Sanders, then I think we'd get a third party candidate in, like maybe Michael Bloomberg, and it would just really stir things up.
Don't you think it would be somewhat clarifying for the nation to have, you know, a red-blooded American capitalist businessman in Donald Trump up against a self-avowed socialist? You could just pick where you want to go. Do you want to go morning in America? Do you want to go dusk in Moscow?
I definitely think from a media perspective that would be the ticket that
ideologically clarifying.
But in terms of, you know, from my perspective, I think the candidate that we would most likely want to run against, speaking from the Democratic Party's position, would be Ted Cruz.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Sean, let's take it back to Jeff City for a moment. Ethics everywhere. An issue that you're passionate about is transparency.
That's right.
I think the one thing you can debate how, you know, what makes a person ethical and what you need to do. But one thing I think that I personally am passionate about, I think a lot of people are, is transparency.
That's right.
And you talked about extending that not just to the legislators, but to the political class as well.
Yeah, and you know, that's the thing is every check that we get for a campaign, every lobbyist gift you get is very transparent. It's wrote down. This is how much. This is who from. This is who I represent. And there's one party in that doesn't really have to abide by those rules, and that's the 501c4s. You know, we don't have to say who donates money to our to fund us. You don't have to.
But every dollar that comes to you ever gets done. And I think that's a good thing.
I think it is, and that's what's transparent about government, and it's something that your voters need to know, and your constituents need to know, and I'm A-okay with that. But when you have groups that are represented that say, you can't find out who funds me, then I have a real problem with that.
Rob Johnson, you have connections and you're in several different states. What Missouri is doing right now, do you see that in other states, or is this something we're dealing with because of our climate here in Missouri?
No, you see that around the country. I mean, everybody is moving towards that. You guys have looser campaign limits than a lot of states that I'm used to, and I think that obviously goes to a lot of it because just the amount of money that is spent and donated is unique in Missouri with your unlimited contributions.
Representative McCreary, I mean, I think it sounds good to limit contributions, but at the end of the day, how do you justify telling other people what to do with their money?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. No, I understand that perspective, but I think that when a candidate for some office gets $1 million check and then she tries to act like that's not going to influence her behavior in office if she were to win, I think that that's just over the limit. I'm for sensible limits.
Don't you think, though, I mean, regular people might scoff at that, but look at their record and see if it does, and then vote for somebody else. I mean, I think that doesn't transparency, you're running for office. The people that are supporting you are well listed. Anybody can get online and see it. Isn't transparency the best? And if there's a voter that cares that your opponent or you took a big check from somebody that they don't like, they cannot vote for you. A lot of these things come down to those darn voters don't seem to care about what we want them to care about sometimes.
Well, you know, there's certainly it is absolutely clear that there is a lack of faith and confidence in our institutions and our public institutions. So any kind of legislation that can be introduced that incorporates more confidence in our political system, I think that is a positive step. Ethics reform is a positive step. And you know, when you think about it, Scott, in this whole new information and communication revolution that we're in, really power's legitimacy is directly proportionate to its transparency today.
Sure.
And so, you know, I think that the 501c4 bill where the donors are hidden, we need to turn that around and restore confidence so that people know what's going on. People want to press in. They want to study. They want to see who's donating to what candidate. They want to see what issues are being backed by which organizations. And I think that it's a positive thing for Missouri.
Let's go back to state politics again. We just had Senator Schaefer on. I loved the professionalism. I assume most of the stuff he said you thought was just awful.
Right.
Break it down for me. Who do you want to see in that AG race? And tell me about the Democratic candidates.
Well, I think, unfortunately for Senator Schaefer, he started out as a fairly moderate Republican in his political career, and because he drew a Republican challenger for the primary, he has gone so far to the right that I think he's unelectable in Missouri. I think he's just too far to the right and too extreme
So you're
for
confident
Missouri.
with either candidate on the other side that they win the election? Mm-hmm. Byron, do you have a favorite in the Democrat side?
You know, I mean, I do, and it's Attorney General Chris Koster, and clearly, you're talking about the AG race.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So I'm a friend of Jake Zimmerman, and you know, Jake has a particular unique quality of really being emotionally connected to his constituents, and I support Jake Zimmerman for the AG race.
Sean, the Democrats have held the AG's office since literally, I think the last time a Republican won it was the 80s. This race seems to come down to maybe for some Republicans who could win.
That's correct.
And the senator makes a compelling case. He's obviously shut down an abortion clinic, which I assume is pretty popular on the Republican side, and his opponent's University of Missouri professor. How does that race end up? And is it a priority for you guys to actually win the AG's office?
I think it's a priority to win multiple statewide offices because we don't have any. We have 2. So I see Kurt really becoming distant from Holly, which is what you should do if you're going to run against a fellow person in the same on the same side. I think that Kurt has the media outlet close by because he's elected, he's there, and I think that puts him a little farther ahead of Josh.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. It's a race we hope you'll come back to talk about as the campaign season goes on.
Mine, maybe? I don't know.
Yours hit there as the governor's race. You know.
Yeah.
And we'll leave it right there with the confirmation of a Zizzer return here on This Week in Missouri Politics, and we'll see you next week. This Week in Missouri Politics, brought to you in part by Sterling Bank.